All right, so my name is Cody Kyle. I'm the resident strength coach here in Patrick Ryder's biomechanics class. Today we got five movements that weightlifting movements that are all related towards baseball and transferring the variables such as explosiveness, balance, coordination, and things like that are needed to um, transfer into good pitching mechanics as well as velocity and higher velocity and things like that. So we're going to break these down biomechanically so that you can perform the movements correctly and get the best transfer out of these movements. First exercise we have today is going to be the back squat. The back squat develops leg strength as lower body strength is a very important part of pitching. For the first part of the movement, the athlete's going to get into position and perform the eccentric part of the movement. The eccentric part of the movement is the downward half part of the movement when the muscles are lengthening. On the way down, the athlete is going to be experiencing hip flexion from about 180 degrees to around 80 to 90 degrees, depending on how far they can go with their depth, and depending on their form and strength, and if they can keep their chest vertical. The athlete is also experiencing knee flexion with a range of motion of 180 degrees to between 60 to 70 degrees, which is optimal depth, just past 90, so that the athlete can activate more of the posterior change and also load the quadriceps effectively. The athlete is also going to be experiencing dorsiflexion of the ankle, which allows the quadriceps to be loaded. The concentric part of the movement is the upward part of the movement, or the part of the movement in which the muscles are shortening. On the way up, the athlete is experiencing the exact opposite of what happened on the way down. They are traveling from between 80 to 90 degrees of hip flexion, depending on the load they are taking on and their ability to maintain form back to 180 degrees through hip extension, knee extension, and returning to a straight leg. The second exercise that we have today is going to be the split squat. This is a variation of the regular squat in which the athlete will extend the hip back to around 180 degrees on a range of motion on an elevated surface. The athlete will then step forward to complete the eccentric part of the movement with the leg that is not elevated. During this part of the movement, the athlete will experience hip flexion very similar to a full depth squat, as well as knee flexion. One of the main differences in this movement is so that the posterior chain is activated is that you do not want any dorsiflexion in the ankle and want a straight shank instead. The third exercise that we're going to have today is going to be the shoulder external rotation. This movement is good for pitchers because it strengthens and improves muscular endurance for the muscles of the shoulder girdle. These muscles include the posterior delts, the rhomboids, and the rotator cuff muscles. To get into the starting position of this movement, the athlete will first abduct the arm at the shoulder joint from 0 degrees range of motion to 90 degrees, perpendicular to the body. Then the athlete will perform elbow flexion from 180 degrees to 90 degrees. This will create a right angle between the elbow and the shoulder. To perform the movement, the athlete will then perform external rotation of the shoulder in a range of motion of 0 degrees to 90 degrees to strengthen the muscles. Doing this over and over again will create muscular endurance and help the athlete perform better with their throwing mechanics. So the fourth movement we have for today is going to be shoulder protraction and retraction. This movement is very important for baseball players as it strengthens the small muscles of the shoulder girdle as well as the upper back muscles. This movement is very important for both muscular strength and muscular endurance of these muscles because pitchers are throwing thousands and thousands of pitches each year, and this will prevent overuse injuries. To get into the starting position, the athlete will be getting into the prone plank position on their elbows. For the eccentric part of the movement, the athlete will retract the shoulder girdle in a range of motion of around 30 to 50 degrees depending on their shoulder flexibility. For the concentric part of the movement, they will now protract the shoulders in the same range of motion and try to exaggerate the rounding of the shoulder girdle. For our fifth and final movement is going to be a pistol squat. This movement is good for pitchers because it helps promote pillar stability. This movement, being a variation of the regular squat, places emphasis on the aspects of balance and core strength as well as explosiveness, which are all important aspects of the pitching motion. To get into the starting position for this movement, the athlete will plant the leg they will be using for the movement firmly into the ground and take the other leg and perform flexion at the hip to 90 degrees while also flexing the knee at 90 degrees. The starting position will look very similar to a pitcher's drive position as they are about to drive towards home plate. The athlete will then perform the eccentric part of the movement by performing hip flexion, knee flexion, and ankle dorsiflexion. The differences in this movement relative to a regular back squat will be that hip flexion may decrease to 50 to 60 degrees range of motion because of the extra aspects of balance and the difficulty to maintain form. In this video, knee flexion is only to about 120 degrees range of motion because I myself cannot maintain form all the way down into the squat past 90 degrees range of motion. But that is the goal of this movement, to teach the athlete how to explode out of the hole. This transfers well when a pitcher is in the part of his movement where he has max potential energy before the leg drive towards the plate, so the pitcher can maximize his usage of this energy into the pitch. The athlete will reach the bottom of the movement and then explode out of the hole to complete the concentric part of the movement by performing hip extension, knee extension, and bringing the athlete back to rest.